Hi, this is Interplay, Conversations in Music, with a very special guest today. I'm Michael Shapiro, and say hello to JoAnn Falletta. Hi, JoAnn.
Hi, Michael. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. You know, this is such a difficult time. Live music is not being done, except these odd concerts in Europe where people are seated far apart and there are very few people in the audience. Sometimes plants. I don't know if you saw that.
I saw that. Wasn't that amazing?
That was great. But I want to talk, having been through COVID pneumonia myself, I'd like to talk to you about your life because when I look at your schedule, Hawaii, Virginia, Buffalo, Ireland, the continent, South America, back to Buffalo, I do notice that you go to Hawaii in the cold month.
Well, if I'm lucky, if I'm lucky. But before COVID, I was really Michael traveling every week, and as much as I got used to it. I mean, and I loved so much being in those places and working with those orchestras that I made the travel work. As you know, traveling is not easy, and but so it feels very strange now to be in Buffalo since March 12th. I mean, it's quite amazing to have not been able to really travel. Of course, all the concerts in the summer have been canceled, and probably we'll see other cancellations. But it's made us, sort of reinvent how we do our music, how we think about music.
It certainly does, because we find, at least for as a composer and a sometimes performer, all my gigs are canceled through the year, pretty much.
Yeah.
Everyone. And the economic effect is severe for freelancer. And I know for the musicians, because I talk to them. I have friends on Broadway, they're not playing,
Mhm.
in the orchestras, in the Met, in the Philharmonic, etc. So, what are you doing that's different other than not moving through airline terminals?
Well, being here in Buffalo, as sort of quarantined in Buffalo, has it's enabled me to focus on the Philharmonic and how we come out of this for the orchestra, because that is tantamount. I mean, that is of the paramount importance. So how do we stay in front of our public? I've been auditing concerts, archival concerts, editing them, and making sure that every week we're in front of the public, our public, on the air. We've been making, those crazy things where everyone plays from their living room, and we try and put it together. We've done some of that. There's a lot of keeping in touch with people. I've been looking more at repertoire that I never had the chance to look at, which is good. I mean, doing a lot of research, but it's still not the same as making music in front of people, playing to an audience, and that we really miss.
No, you really do miss. I'm curious about the repertoire question. One thing I love about your conducting, and I've told you this, is the way you phrase. It is innate. You have all the tools of communication, and I know, having conducted the Virginia Symphony on your recommendation, how much they love you. You were you were there 25 years, or you were about to be 25 years.
Well, I'm just leaving them now after it would be 29 years. Yeah. So,
Oh,
but and it was it is a beautiful orchestra and beautiful experience. And you talked about phrasing. I think architecture is something you learn. Well, I shouldn't be telling this to a composer, because of course it's all about architecture when you're writing. But what our job is to realize that architecture for you. So we have to think about the architecture, and thinking about architecture in the largest sense, and then the individual architecture of the phrase is what enables us to give music momentum. And we owe that to the composer.
quite clearly, but there's something else that you have. I think the way you lyrically blend a phrase or turn it is totally yours. And there is a Falletta sound no matter what you are conducting. I can hear it even if I don't know it's you conducting on a recording because your personality gets into the music. It's so clear. And there's great clarity too with the turn of the phrase and the attack and the togetherness and the warmness or coldness if it's the piece calls for it. I'm curious about repertoire. I've heard from some of your colleagues, some very established names, that things are changing, some of them not great, where management is often thinking about box office and being very involved in selection of repertoire, even for some very uh, powerful names. It's not the Carillon days. So, how does this affect a conductor in Buffalo?
You know, I think I'm very lucky in Buffalo. And I'll say that because I came to an orchestra with a history of risk taking. When you go back to Lucas Foss's days,
Yeah.
when this was the epicenter of the new music world. And Lucas was the kind of person who sought out the most avant-garde works and played them for what was then a conservative audience. So he changed that audience. He changed that audience. And then that was followed by Michael Tilson Thomas, who also was a great lover of new American music. So I think that our audience here has developed, at least at that point, a kind of open-mindedness, and they trust us now. So yes, they love the big favorites, but I think they enjoy even more if that big favorite is on a concert with a new piece, if the composer is with us and can talk to us, if it's a world premiere of something and we have the honor of doing it. I think they're very involved and they trust us because they can't know all of these pieces, but they know if it's on our stage that we believe in it and we're going to play it to the best of our ability.
It's quite clear, even in the days when Morty Feldman was at the college, and I knew Lucas, I knew what he did there, it was wonderful stuff. And your history goes back decades. But you look 14, but it's certainly we both do, right?
Yes, but I've maybe it's the music, but I've been there now 20 years, and at this point, I think probably when I look back, I can really see that change has happened. You know, you can't do that in 2 or 3 years. You can't do that if you're only in the city for 6 weeks a year. You have to be invested in the sound of the orchestra, in the culture of the orchestra, in where they're going. And what's helped us too, Michael, and you'll appreciate this, is the fact that we record so much. We record for Naxos, as you do, and we record for our own label. And in recording, we're sort of documenting where we are, and we're giving the musicians a certain way of listening to music. You know, when they know it's forever, it's going to be on that disc, and it's going to be heard on radio, and they analyze how they approach their art form, and that's really changed the orchestra. They are listening in a very profound way now because of all the recordings.
I have a question about recording because I've recorded in England and Wales, as I've told you. Only chamber music here. The reason being union rates.
Yeah.
Do you have a different situation there than in other cities?
Well, we do, and I was very lucky to inherit it. It seemed that at some point, much prior to my time, the Buffalo Philharmonic had put into its contract a great amount of electronic media guarantee, EMG, so that they were being paid all along for the possibility of making recordings. Now, for most of those years, they never took advantage of that because it was a poor city, it was a difficult time, and they frankly couldn't afford the other costs of making a recording, not just the musicians, but the engineer, the editing, the production of the disc. So it wasn't used. And we have that. And when Naxos approached us, we knew we could do it with limited expense. I mean, we still have expense, but it's so much less because we have so much electronic media guarantee. So we're able to sort of document who we are now.
I mean, some orchestras you can only record 15 minutes a session, and that's it. And
Yeah.
in England, I don't
Well,
have that problem.
we do abide by those rules. We have to abide by those rules, and I think that the musicians, when they approach recording, and they know that they can only take, I think it's 20 minutes, 15 minutes from that hour, they're very focused on making sure it's as perfect as it can be. It's tough, though. It is tough to record in the U.S.
No, I understand. And it's something which I think limits our orchestras going forward in getting revenue. It would be something, I mean, Hollywood and everything else, instead of going to Europe, even using the London Symphony, you could use the Buffalo Philharmonic.
Well,
So,
it's true. I wish we had that possibility of doing more, but
well, next
our
contract in the
orchestras
New
are
World.
great. Yeah, and the American orchestras are so fantastic, Michael. I'm sure you agree with me. I mean, first
Yes,
of all, they can play anything. They can play
yes.
anything. I mean, and no matter how difficult it is, and they're also very nimble. I mean, they can play a pop concert one weekend and turn right around and work on a Mahler symphony on Tuesday. So they are very intelligent, very alert, quick learners, and always prepared.
That's quite true. Um, Now let's talk about your thoughts about the post-vaccine herd immunity world and music. I'm thinking about it. I will tell you what happened to me first.
Yeah, please.
When I was in Northern Westchester Hospital with 101, 2 fever, whatever it was, getting all this crazy antibiotic, I was thinking of two things. Get home to your family and get the violin concerto for Tim Fain done, get it played and recorded, and write the opera that you just got rights for. I got the rights for Isaac Bashevis Singer's The Slave. You know, he won this Nobel
Very
Prize, and
cool.
it's the most amazing love story possible. I have a production team, and I have to find a librettist in the process now. So, but those things got me to say, I'm not dying. I'm not going into the oxygen tent.
Oh
Uh,
my gosh.
It was
Well,
awful.
I actually saw you in Albany just a little bit before you got ill,
Okay.
and I was devastated to hear that. But you're fine now, and you've got your goals ahead of you. That's good.
Well, yeah. What else is there?
Well, and I hope we can be a part of the Tim Fain Concerto Goal because that we love Tim and we love your music, and that would be
I
fun for us.
I would love it. So hopefully we can all sit together.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. Where do you see you, and where do you see music in general for you, me, and Tim, and everybody else, and the audience, most importantly, going after this? Do we have a
Well,
responsibility that's bigger?
I think it's made me think that it is bigger, and we have a wonderful audience that supports us in Buffalo, but I think in spending all this time concentrating on music, especially music I didn't know, new music, um, I think that we have to live more in the 21st century, Michael. I really believe that. And I've always loved new music, but as you say, sometimes there is a certain amount of pressure put on conductors to do the most popular pieces. And you can understand that. I can understand that the audience loves to hear them and they're more likely to buy a ticket if they know the piece.
My
Um,
Frankenstein,
yeah,
huge seller,
yeah.
50
They know
productions,
they're excited and and they know what it's going to be about. So, but
horror.
I think that we have to we have to live in the future. I mean, I think that or live in the present and plan for the future, so that there are a lot of voices out there that should be heard, and that's made me reaffirm my belief in that. Now, I'm going to have to take the board and the management along with me, and I think we can, but. I think it's exciting, for instance, to live in a world where you can hear a piece by a Renaissance composer and a 21st century piece on the same program. And that sort of continuum of music, to me, continuum of music is very important.
I love Renaissance music.
Isn't it fantastic?
Oh,
And
I studied,
complex.
yeah, and Monteverdi later,
Yeah.
and Schein and Scheidt and Schutz.
Schwartz.
Schutz. You and I both studied, I think, with Karl Bamberger. Am I right?
Well, I spent time at Manus with Karl Bamberger. My first couple of years there, um, I was privileged to be in his class, and what an amazing man. In Manus, we lived in a very European world because most of our teachers were actually they were refugees. I
Yeah.
didn't probably
Not,
realize that at the time, but they were refugees from the Second World War who had come to New York and were these were amazing musicians like Karl Bamberger, and were teaching us young American kids who knew nothing. And um, what a beautiful man! And the way he talked about music. Do you remember, Michael?
mhm.
How you talk about music? You talk about Beethoven Sixth, not in terms of the techniques of conducting, but I mean, as he always would say, think of Vienna and the fields of Vienna and the wind rustling through those fields. And he brought it to life. I mean, saying that, I still get a little shudder thinking of him saying that. It was like, how beautiful. I mean, it's just, or he, spent time talking about how how precious that Mozart would write, take one moment of his life to put a little dot on that note, and we have to treasure that. I mean, his love of music was so intense.
It's beautiful. And, he also taught me phrasing, and which it's that whole Luft,
Yeah,
the air, the
right.
voice, the breath. I
He would
see it
sing a
in
lot. Do
you.
you remember? He would sing very often.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Now let's talk about when you approach a score, the study of the score, which I found fascinating, especially from
Well,
people like you.
I mean, I think of architecture as well when I study it. You look at, here's a score that you've never done, or it could be a score that you sort of know, like a Bruckner 4, the first time I did it. You know the sound of it and you've heard performances, but you're studying the score for the first time. And for me, it's important to see the big cathedral first, not reading from note one to the last page, to understand what's the edifice, what's the building, what is the structure of it. And maybe some of that comes from Manus. We studied Schenkerian analysis all the
Hmm.
time, and to see the way it's put together in the biggest sense and then work inwards. So that's how I always approach it, seeing how it works in a big structure, and then get smaller and smaller and smaller until you're looking at details of actually an oboe line, or why the recap is different than the exposition, in what way. Um, and I love that. I love score study. I don't think you can be a conductor if you don't really love it.
Well, you have to also, as a composer, study all the time. And two scores that I study recently, being also partially a vocal composer, is the Adagietto of Mahler 5 and the Adagio for strings. You could also say the Albinoni pieces, famous piece, is the same. I believe, as Sam Barber made clear, that if you cannot sing the phrase in the orchestral motion, you're doing it too slow.
Yeah.
So, like the Adagio for strings, often done glacially slow.
Yeah.
Where you listen to Toscanini's premiere recording when Sam was involved with him, the breath is there. Or the
It moves.
Adagietto,
Yeah, it moves.
like
You know, it could be that sometimes tradition, these pieces become kind of tradition bound, and because someone very important does it slowly, it becomes the way you have to do it. But I think you're absolutely right. If you can't say the sentence or finish the phrase or sing the line, the music is not going to project forward. And that's what it's all about.
now, when you study, let's say, Missa Solemnis, which I'm studying now, just to study, listening and listening. Do you ever listen to how Toscanini conducted it in 1940, or with Jussi Björling and Zinga Milanov,
Yeah, yeah.
or
I do.
Klemperer? Did it
Well, I do.
'50s?
I listen to a lot of things, but I find that for me, it's better to study it first so that you have in your head, in your the ear inside, you have an idea of what you want or what you think or what the page is telling you without someone else in the way. Because essentially, I mean, and you, I hope you would agree with me, we have to be instructed by the composer. And he's not talking to us usually, and it's a great pleasure if they're there. But that music has to come off the page and speak to you without an intermediary at first. And then when
Really?
you feel confident enough to go to the next level, you can listen to Toscanini. You can listen to well, listen to someone who knew the composer well, like Eugene Ormandy and Rachmaninoff or Sibelius. People who were standing there right next to the conductor saying, "No, move that, please," or "I'd love to have a little more time." Or then okay, that's the composer's voice coming to us.
The Rachmaninoff recordings with Stokowski first, and then with Eugene Ormandy, to me are echt. They're perfect. I don't know how to change them. The tempo and the tempi are live, you know?
Yes.
They,
Well, he also felt that orchestra came to understand him, the Philadelphia Orchestra.
oh,
They
yeah,
they adored him. I mean, he was their composer,
no
and
question.
they loved him, and he loved them. I forgot what score it was, but he insisted in one score that he dedicated the piece to every single member, and every name was on the front piece of the score. It probably
Is that the
doesn't do it anymore.
Third Symphony, maybe?
I don't think it was the first symphony, but it might have
Third,
been
third, the
the
third.
third. It might have been the third. Yes, it might have been the third. So every single person in that orchestra was someone he loved. So maybe they knew his voice, without even being told very much.
And he recorded the vocalese with them, which is
Yes.
gorgeous. And the Third Symphony.
Right.
To conclude, a few more questions, or one or two. What haven't you done? You've done a lot, so many years of conducting work all around the world. But what would you still like to do that you haven't done?
I don't know if I would point to particular pieces because I have done so many pieces. I mean, some things I have never done, like a Messiaen work. I'd love to do that, but I don't have big holes in which I say, "Oh, I never got to do this." I feel like my career has given me the opportunity to do so much and to learn from orchestras in such a real way. So um, just to now look into the future, and I think that that's a responsibility I'm feeling even more keenly now.
Follow up, though. I know you've conducted Eroica as an example, Beethoven 3, it's the Third Symphony. But I gotta believe, now I'm going to shift to the 7. There's a reason. Beethoven's Seventh Symphony, which has the probably the most perfect slow movement, the variations that you can think about. Does the JoAnn of now give it something different than the JoAnn when you first started?
Yes. I mean, I think everything that's happened to me in my life, my just growing up, growing up with orchestras, learning from musicians, it's different. I mean, but I would say it's organically different. It's not all of a sudden I say, "You know what? I have to take it twice as fast now." No, that's not me. But the idea that I'm free enough now to let the musicians around me inform the piece more, and I love that, to let them have a voice, so that Buffalo Philharmonic's Beethoven Third, which we're in the process of releasing very soon, is different than the Virginia Symphony's Beethoven Third or Albany Symphony if I did it there as a guest, because yes, my idea of it is the same, but I want it to be theirs. And so that's a big difference. I mean, in that sort of invitation to the musicians, offering them lots of ideas, but listening back to them at who they are.
Let's just talk quickly about the phrasing, and then we're going to go in that movement of the Seventh Symphony. Do you think you would approach differently than you would have before with what has happened to us in life?
I still think of it as something that moves, and sees the light in the middle of it, sees
Yeah.
the hope in the middle of it. And maybe that speaks to me now about the situation we're in.
Well, this has been a beautiful conversation where we've remembered and we've gone to the light and to the hope. And I
Thank you
adore
so much.
you, and I think you're
I
the
adore you
best.
too.
Thank you. And
Thank you so
this
much.
has been Interplay, conversation in music with JoAnn Falletta. This is your host, Michael Shapiro.